Welcome, everyone. Look at all these people. Woohoo! Look, I know quite a few of you, and this is getting really exciting. I know that we're still trying to figure out how we do this on this end. I don't even see Doug yet. He's probably like, how do I get in? So also, let's see. I realized they had a language dynamics group name. All right, Doug, where are you? He texted me and he said, hey, let me in. All right, well, apparently I'm going to start this conversation by myself. That's okay, we don't need him. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Trina Spencer, and I'm one of the conversationalists for this conversation. And I can see that we've got lots of people joining in, which is really exciting. Doug is very excited to be here too. But we are, like I said, experiencing a little bit of technical difficulties while we wait for him. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give you an introduction to comprehending comprehension, what this is, right? Because you're all here because you're curious. I know you people, okay? All right, well, so we're super glad you're joining us, and the us is going to be Doug as soon as he can figure it out, for our inaugural conversation. We thank you for being brave enough to spend an hour chatting with us, right? So what is comprehending comprehension? The simple answer is we don't know yet, right? It is a live audience interactive conversation, we think, we hope, right? But, you know, there's been a lot of like digital and Zoom professional development going on throughout 2020 and still into 2021. But we wanted to do something different. We're kind of like tired of those. We want to do something more interactive and fun. And we miss people. We miss engaging in conversations. And if you already know Doug and myself, you know that we are super interactive and we love a good conversation, especially when we disagree or when the answers are not simple. So those are the funnest conversations to have. That's kind of what we're imagining this comprehending comprehension to be about. We chose a live audience format because it's unscripted. And sometimes we do our best thinking when it's unscripted, right? And we also know that the solutions to the kinds of things we want to talk about are not simple, and that most people are likely grappling with them. Right? And it's okay. We want to create a safe space where we can do this little experiment and figure out, hey, does this live audience format work? Right? We also want to make sure that a lot of different people are in these conversations. We kind of think that this is intended for anyone who's interested in education. I recognize some of the people. There's a lot of speech language pathologists. It's awesome that you're here. But sometimes we spend a lot of time talking to SLPs when I wish we were talking more to teachers, administrators, psychologists. So maybe some of you are here too. And if they're not here, then maybe in the future, those of you who are here and are speech language pathologists can invite one of your other educator friends to join this conversation. All right. Now, let me briefly tell you how this is going to work. I appreciate that everybody has their audio muted. It just makes things easier to have a conversation so that we don't get background noise. But soon you're going to get a chance to do some talking too. What we want to do is, if you guys have a question and a question about listening comprehension and reading comprehension, use your Zoom hand raise. Okay. That way we can at least take turns and have some professional etiquette, just given the number of people. But there is going to be a chat and a chat moderator. Okay, so if you have something you want to say, a comment you want to make, just plop it in the chat. Okay, but we would like to see your questions done, verbally with your camera on and your microphone on. All right, so raise your hand and somebody will moderate and then call on you to make sure that your video and your audio is on and you can ask the question. Now keep in mind, Doug and I have prepared a few questions in case you guys are quiet. All right, but it would be a lot more fun if you guys had some questions too. Now, there might be some time where Doug and I, if he ever joins me, right? let's see, we might have some time where we ask each other questions, and we'd be, you might get to listen to us talk about some things too. So I'll go through the disclosures while we're still waiting for Doug. Doug and I are affiliated with Language Dynamics Group, which is a small little company that's hosting this live audience event, right? Through our research, we've developed a number of intervention and assessment tools that are disseminated through Language Dynamics Group. Now, the purpose of comprehension is not to talk about just our assessment tools, right? If we go there, that's okay. But we're really wanting to have a broader conversation about maybe the kinds of things that we could partner on to develop more tools for practitioners, educators, clinicians, psychologists to be able to use. Doug is a professor at Brigham Young University in the Department of Communication Disorders, and I'm an associate professor at the University of South Florida in the Department of Child and Family Studies, and I'm also affiliate faculty in the Department of Communication Science and Disorders. And just as a FYI, the conversation is audio and video recorded so that it can be made available to others at a later time. So if you do not want to be video recorded, you can keep your camera off. All right, let me see. Doug, are you anywhere here?
Hi, Dr. Spencer. It looks like Doug is still attempting to join, so he's having some technical difficulties. So just hang in there for a second.
Okay, well, I can't wait for him. We only got an hour. We got to get this conversation started. So he'll just have to join us when he does. All right, so Mike, let's launch the poll. How do I do that? Polling. Okay, everybody, I launched a poll. Everybody answer the question really quickly. This is how we're going to get started. Awesome. Okay, some people are still voting, but maybe we've got everybody. How many do we have? We still have about, nope, I think we've got everybody, because there's a few moderators that are on as considered participants. All right, so the answer to the question, what do you guys think? Are listening comprehension and reading comprehension the same or different? Okay, well, you guys want to know the results of what you guys think? Most of you said that it is different, right? That listening and reading comprehension are different. So now I'm going to ask a question. How so? How are they different? You can raise your hand. We'll call on you to answer the question. How are they different? Whoever gave you that answer. And by the way, there are about 17% of you that said that they were the same. I don't see any hands. Come on, I'll call on people. Oh wait, 𝗖cie𝗃𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗵. I didn't say it right. Lisa, go.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm an SLP from Canada. I would say that from what I've learned, that reading comprehension is a product, a piece of having good listening comprehension and having adequate decoding or word recognition skills. So it's a piece of the puzzle.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have another comment about maybe how they're different? Okay, Shannon.
The first thing I thought of about the differences were the cognitive demands for each. They do differ in many ways.
Okay, so the demand for reading is higher?
It's higher in some ways.
All right. Who's it higher for? Are there particular like groups of individuals or groups of people that it's more demanding for?
Well, it's more demanding in general in executive function for everyone, but that's particularly evident in kids with language and learning difficulties.
So you're saying that reading comprehension is more difficult than listening comprehension because of the cognitive
It
load?
might be. It might be.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. Karen Nix. Karen, are you able to unmute?
Hi, I hope you guys can hear me. I'm sorry, I'm in a little rural area. So what if I build on what everybody said and I say, yes, it's there's executive function, and yes, there is this sort of processing capacity. But what about the decontextual nature that's often present in reading? Does that add another layer to that processing model?
Well, okay, that's a good point. It could be, right? But in listening comprehension, if they're listening to a book or a story, it would still be decontextualized as opposed to a conversation, right? Right. And I actually have a comment about Shannon's point that I recently did a study when what I discovered is that the children in my participant pool who were school-age children with autism, they actually did much, much better at reading comprehension than listening comprehension. And the irony is our intervention was a listening comprehension intervention, yet they did better with reading comprehension. And we concluded that one of the primary reasons is because the input is visual, they can see it, and it's not as fleeting of a modality as listening comprehension, right? There's some other things, you know, like attention to auditory stimuli, that kind of thing. But I would actually, my experience is that reading comprehension in some ways is easier. Let's see, 𝗖cie𝗺𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗲𝗵𝗲. Oh, hey, Doug, I see you.
Yeah, I'm here. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to join you.
How about welcome, Doug?
Well, we got to get this away from being the Trina show too. Come on, Sue. We got to hear from you. Sue's got her hand up, but she doesn't want to talk to us. That's okay, Sue.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, I think listening comprehension, there are some aspects that are easier because you've got the prosody and the facial cues, gesture. Those aspects of it do facilitate comprehension if you just go above and beyond the linguistic level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. Those super segmentals are really important.
Yeah.
They certainly help. So what's the poll showing? Oh, we have 2 people that have voted so far, or 4 people that have voted.
No, everybody voted.
Oh,
you just missed it. 84% said that they're different. 16% said that they're the same.
I love it. I love it. So, okay. So Sue's saying they're different because of this super segmental piece, right? Like you've got all of these visual cues and prosody and all of that. Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm sorry, I'm coming in a little bit late.
You missed some of the other comments. Let's see. Shannon said, oh man, I can't even remember. But we already covered that there's more cognitive load with the reading comprehension. Okay. And I mentioned that there's a visual input. What did I miss?
Hey.
Well, we talked a little bit about how that load can look differently for different subgroups of children. So you had mentioned your recent study too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and that's a great point. We have someone who may be technologically even more disadvantaged than me in this group, and that is 𝗄𝗏𝗵𝗲. He says he has a comment, but he has no idea how to raise his hand. Ken, just start yelling.
I just told him how to raise his hand. I'm finally teaching him something.
Yeah. All right, Con.
I'm telling you, it doesn't have the thing down there to say raise your hand.
It's so good to see you, Ken.
Thanks.
I'm so glad you've emerged out of retirement to communicate with us. We love it. So what's on your mind?
So I was going to say that I think in order to answer that, you have to know how you're defining listening comprehension. Because I agree with people have been saying about differences between reading comprehension and what you all are doing right now. But we don't measure, people don't measure what we're doing right now when they look at the contributions of listening comprehension to reading comprehension.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, can you extrapolate a little further? Like, what are people measuring then?
Well, I just submitted a paper on this. That's why.
Well, we'll be for sure to read it, but tell us about it now.
Well, who knows if they'll get accepted. When you look at the measures that people use when they're looking at, say, the simple view of reading, which is, decoding, all the measures are metalinguistic measures. And in fact, most of those measures are ones that people use in other studies where they're just trying to look at, what are the contribution of morphological awareness to reading or something like that. And so they're mislabeling what it is that they're measuring. End of my sentence.
I picked that up from your prosody. That's
Thank you.
Very good. Anybody want to add to that? Okay, look, I feel like we're in a classroom. Trina, I don't want it to be like a classroom.
No. So I have a point too that I did a lot of reading this week just to make sure that I, stayed up on this topic, right? And made sure I was fresh on it. And I reread Hoover and Goff's Simple View of Reading. And one of the things that jumped out at me was the point that we had to use parallel measurement tasks to measure listening comprehension and reading comprehension. Otherwise, we have such a misalignment, right? And so Ken brings that up. Oftentimes, what we see in the research is listening comprehension is like characterized by receptive picture ID, or maybe answering WH questions, but the reading comprehension is measured completely different, like through a norm reference standardized test. And so like those two constructs, they're going to have some correlation, but it's not going to be as strong as if it would be if you were measuring both of them in the same task format, right?
Okay, so Trina, I've got a question. Did you already address this question? Why do we even care? Like, why are you asking this question? Oh, and by the way that you asked the question on Facebook was so revealing of what you were thinking, because you used the singular is reading comprehension and reading comprehension and language comprehension, the same thing. And I'm thinking as I'm processing this, like, are you sure that shouldn't have been our reading comprehension and listening comprehension the same thing? I'm like, I think you're revealing yourself. Anyways, why are you asking this question? Like, who cares?
Yeah. Wait, you're asking me that question?
Well, I don't know. I'm asking anyone. Like, why would we ask that question? I mean, who even cares about that?
I think that is a really good question. Why did we ask this question in our inaugural show? I don't know what to call it. We might never have another one. We're going to get discontinued like straight out of the gate.
Yeah.
All right. So somebody going to answer, or is Doug going to answer it for you?
Ashley Adams has her hand raised.
Oh, Ashley, thank you.
Yeah, from what I know of both of your work, I would say you're probably hinting at that we might underestimate how important oral language skills are, and when we're thinking about kids who struggle with reading.
Well, that's a good answer. Look how smart she is. That was an educated guess. She took our work and said a good answer. I think you're right. That is probably where we would go, is that we do underestimate the importance of listening comprehension, right? In schools in general, like everybody focuses on reading comprehension, but they almost don't even try to get to reading comprehension until it's too late, right? And that's a concern of ours. Yeah, it's a big concern of ours. It's not that they're not working on comprehension, it's that they're not very intentional about it. Or there are so many kids in our schools who probably need an intensive dose of listening comprehension instruction, or instruction that works towards listening comprehension, but they're not getting that access to it because why is that? Like, I don't need to tell you, like, why do we not work on listening comprehension in intentional manner in younger grades or in elementary school before reading comprehension, I guess. Megan.
I like to say it's because language is invisible and it's not something that we see, and so we don't think to work on it.
I love that. That is, yeah, I agree with that. And it's invisible maybe because we're not measuring it very well.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Amy Ludlow adds that we don't know how to work on it. And she mentions that she talks about this all the time with her resource teacher, that it's just not clear to a lot of people what to do. Like, it may be pretty clear that we need to do something to increase or improve this oral language foundation, but how to do it and what to do is another thing altogether.
That's right, right. And earlier, Lisa basically gave us the simple view of reading, right? That we need to have word recognition and decoding skills and listening comprehension, and reading comprehension is the product of that. One of my new favorite quotes is, reading comprehension is not a skill, it's the result of effective decoding and listening comprehension, right? Because in the literature too, we do a lot of like, what is reading comprehension? Well, it's the product, the result of these things. So, okay, Sue, you have your hand raised.
One of my favorite articles is by Kim. I think it's 218, Why the Simple View of Reading Isn't So Simple. Mm-hmm. And what I really like about that is her series of statistical analyses boiled down to two fundamental areas that are really important for listening comprehension and reading comprehension, which is grammar and vocab. So we can pull those essences out. And I think if actually, because I'm a school-based speech pathologist here in Australia, and I do a lot of work, particularly on oral vocabulary. I think we've got to get better at teaching complex grammar at the oral and written level to build fundamentals in both auditory listening comprehension and reading comprehension. And of course, referring to Ken's work in morphology is integral in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You are so right. And good morning, Sue. It's a little early there where you are.
It's a really profound statement though, Sue, because when you talk about comprehension, a lot of our educator friends just go right to vocabulary. And that's just sort of like what they think needs to be emphasized almost exclusively. And you're right, complex syntax is another factor, as well as morphology, morphological awareness, and morphological manipulation. Those are all really crucial, right? But maybe the reason why those aren't targeted is because people don't understand, like Katie's saying, 𝗖cie_𝗺𝗵𝗲, people don't understand all the pieces of language that contribute to comprehension. They don't really understand how to analyze those things, how to treat those things. And that's like Trina D was saying, right? It's like knowing what to focus on is difficult. And I think we sit in, as speech language pathologists anyways, we sit in sort of a unique position where that's what we spend a lot of time learning in school, is we learn about all of the different aspects of language and how to assess language and how to treat language. And a lot of our fellow educators have no classes, no formal coursework at all on language. And I think that's a major disadvantage. In fact, Pamela Snow, she's been on this topic lately, and she's asking, why did we sell the farm to the speech language pathologists? Why are the educators giving all this most important task to the SLPs? Not that she doesn't love SLPs, but she's like wondering, this is one of the most important things you can learn in school about how to assess and treat language, because it is clearly a foundational skill. Yet it's only the SLP that seems to really come out of the system with knowledge on that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm a huge fan of this topic. And if you don't know me, I am not a speech language pathologist, but I came at language kind of through the education system, right? I was a school psychologist, a behavior analyst and special education teacher. And you want to know what really frustrated me is that I could to decode, right? And then I'd ask them to tell me what they read or answer WH questions, deer in headlights, right? So I got to comprehension through my inability to teach effectively, because I was like, there's something else there. And the truth is, I believe that teachers know that too. Instinctually, they know there's something else there. They just don't have proper tools or the knowledge that Doug was just talking about to be able to go, oh, this is what I need to be teaching. Vocabulary is the most sensible one, but unfortunately, what they don't know, most of us, I would say, not just teachers, but most of us do not know how to teach vocabulary effectively. And then I want to make one other point that, let's see, 𝗂𝗏 makes. She's like talking about diagramming sentences. And I'm going to say, I believe that we can teach grammar without having to teach grammar, right? We can teach the use of grammatically correct and sophisticated sentences without ever telling the kid, this is a noun, this is a verb, this is whatever. I don't know any of those things, right? But I believe that we can teach it really well.
Hang on. Now, you're right, of course, when it comes to helping people learn how to understand and produce language. But I think Kelly, I got to defend Kelly here. I think she's talking about the teachers and the school psychologists, speech language pathologists, people who are tasked with measuring. Well, people who are tasked with measuring language and knowing what to target in language. And that does require meta-linguistic skills, right? Because you, Trina, you talk about right and left branching temporal adverbial subordinate clauses all the time, and you didn't need to know any of those words to be able to use them. But when you are analyzing language, you use that all the time, right? So I think that's what, not to speak for Kelly, but I think that's what she's getting at.
Maybe Kelly is talking about that, right? And I would agree. You have to learn those structures to be able to teach them well to teachers or to adults, right? So we have some, meta-linguistic skill about it. But for young kids, I mean, I'll tell you what I've seen is like first graders going through a grammar lesson that's an explicit instruction, and I'm like, they didn't get anything out of that. They don't know how to use complex sentences anymore, right? They know how to identify the noun or the subject, but maybe they don't even know that, right? So like through intervention that integrates vocabulary, complex sentence, so that children are getting practice using language, right? That might be more effective than pointing out grammatical structures to young kids.
It's good. It's good. I love all the comments, by the way. They're so great.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm catching all of them, but they're good.
Who has a question?
Who does?
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Oh, it was really more a comment around your comment, Trina, around teaching this stuff, if you want to call it. I think it is context is the real piece that we've got to look at. So it's about engagement, child engagement. So, I work with 5 to 7-year-olds primarily, and I feel you've got to engage and hook kids in and make it fun, and then you overlay your grammar teaching on top of that. So it's a little dry when you talk about nouns and verbs, but using different ways to engage children. And I use books, storybooks, as a way to really build oral comprehension and the key pieces, which is vocabulary, background knowledge, inferencing, theory of mind, and sentence grammar. You wrap it together in an engaging way, and kids have fun and they learn, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to just highlight what you said, it's very integrated, right? It's not working on vocabulary. This isn't the vocabulary.
Correct.
This isn't the complex.
Correct.
It's very
Correct.
integrated.
Absolutely.
It's functional, useful, meaningful language where, children are talking. Yeah.
Correct. Shameless. Oh, it's not showing up. I was trying to do the shameless plug for our friend Teresa. You can only see the outline of the book. That's so tragic. Teresa Ukraine's book. This is her older one. Can you all see that? Contextualized language intervention. She has a newer one, which I've loaned out, and I don't know who has it right now. If somebody out there has my book, bring it back. But that's exactly what Sue's talking about, right? She's talking about teaching this complex language, this grammar and so forth in context. It just makes it so much more meaningful. And I think, Trina, that's sort of what you're harping on. Is like when you diagram a sentence, you're totally removing it from context, from a communication context anyways.
Yeah.
You guys,
And
I really want to.
I just want to point out that it's good to have useful communication and meaningful context. And yeah, we totally believe that. And we obviously, if you know our work, some of you do, that we really love narratives for that reason, right? Is because we can teach stories, but as soon as a story structure is established, then we can teach all those things. So everything that Sue mentioned, the things that Lisa and Shannon mentioned, we can integrate those things into like story retelling. And Karen, I'm looking at these names, it's Karen. We love the narratives because as children are talking, you mix vocabulary, complex syntax, inferencing, you have to use background knowledge, you have to use theory of mind. You know, those are all the things that we need for reading comprehension. And if we do it in an oral modality, for some, it's easier to start there, right? And especially if decoding is not yet intact. So, or developed, right? We can start in an oral language medium, and build all the same type of repertoires. I call them the constellation of oral language skills. That's kind of like how I like to refer to them. This constellation of oral language skills: vocabulary, discourse structures, complex sentences, morphological knowledge, and inferencing. Those are like my 5 oral language constellation that is necessary for both listening comprehension and reading comprehension.
Okay, Trina, Shannon has a comment, and then I do want to highlight Kelly's comment also.
Yeah, my question for you all is, given a point of view that perhaps there are more similarities between listening and reading comprehension, how does that situate with the RAND model of reading? So how do you compare the text characteristics, the reader characteristics, and the task characteristics between the two modalities of comprehension, if that makes sense? Because in some of my reading this week, there are some proponents of the RAND view that say there's got to be more to it than just listening comprehension.
So tell me the text, I'm sorry, the author perspective, text complexity, and what was the other one?
In the RAND model of reading, they talk about the reader characteristics, the text characteristics, and the task demands.
So I have a question sort of in response to your question. I'm just really curious with this RAND model, and I'm a little familiar with this, like what you're talking about. How does an audiobook work? I'm just wondering about that.
You hit play. It's Friday.
I mean, where does this RAND model fit in an audiobook?
You have listener characteristics, you still have discourse characteristics, and you have to consider the listening task as the task, I suppose. But the question comes from, there's some work at Florida Center for Reading Research where they've looked at what are we missing in the model to explain variance in reading comprehension, and there's a camp that's taking the point of view that they're using the RAND model as the structure to their argument that listening comprehension is important, but there's more to it than the simple view. And so I'm just trying to situate that within this conversation. I'm just curious how you guys feel like. So do you feel that that RAND model for reading comprehension fits squarely into a listening comprehension situation as well?
I think, so I wrote them down to make sure that I kind of thought through each one of them. I think the reader characteristics, right, they're gonna differ based on the task characteristics, right? Because they might have stronger, you know, oral input, right, than visual input, or the decoding might not be established. But text characteristics, you know, they could be generally the same. The primary difference would be that you can hear the prosody when somebody's like reading to you or telling you something. And the task demands, I feel like that's where the most variety is, or the most variation. But there's so much that is still the same, right? It's the same reader, it's the same text complexity. If you were to use the exact same, you know, written language and you just read it to somebody versus they read it themselves, like there's not a lot of differences there. But it looks like maybe Megan has an answer or has more thoughts about this.
Well, I don't know if I have the answer, but I have thoughts on it. So I've definitely thought about reader characteristics and text characteristics. And then I think the RAND model characterizes a little more along reader goal. So what is the purpose of what you are reading? And I actually think you can easily substitute in listening, particularly when we're thinking about listening comprehension as that parallel form of reading, that we need to ask ourselves the same questions about what the reader brings to the table, what the text brings to the table, and what actually the goal and purpose of reading is, whether you're listening to the story or you're reading the story.
Thank you, Megan. So yeah, I think I agree with you. Where did Doug go? Like everybody moves on my screen. So
I'm
making me
still
busy.
here. I'm just processing what Megan said. I really love it. But where Megan is taking me is still to this path of feeling like, wow, there's maybe not a real big difference between oral language and written language, because even the RAND model sort of fits or can fit for the most part within this oral language world too, right? To explain certain things. But okay, so it sounds to me though, let me just like back up for a second. It sounds to me like the RAND model is being introduced to try to explain why there are differences in why there are variances or differences between reading comprehension and listening comprehension. Am I right about that, Shannon? I mean, is that like fair to back up that far and say that's why they've proposed this?
I don't know that that's, I don't have the sense that that's the reason that they're going that direction. I think it's, you know, in my impression of it is that it's looking for what else. So for children who are doing well with listening comprehension, but not reading comprehension, then what else is explaining what could be explaining what's happening there? And I think they're saying, well, the RAND model has all this other stuff that we haven't considered in the simple view.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, Doug, were you about to say something?
Well, yes, but okay, here, I am, okay, I've been thinking a lot about my friend, Alan Kamai. I love Alan. I don't know if you guys know Alan, but I keep thinking about what Alan thinks about reading. And in 2007 and in 2009, he formalized this proposal that he called the narrow view of reading. And it really revealed the way that Alan was thinking about reading. Like the narrow view of reading is that reading is word learning. That's it. Like it's the code. It's decoding the code. It's those aspects. And that comprehension is, well, comprehension. We already have a word for comprehension. It's language comprehension. We don't need to conflate it with the definition of reading. And so to me, like when I think about that model, I think, wow, in Alan's mind, maybe there is no difference at all between reading comprehension and listening comprehension. Is that going too far? Sometimes I'll take things way too far and Alan will get mad at me. So I don't know. I'm just wondering what you guys think about that.
Well, I do want to tell you that Karen is his doc student. So how lucky is she, right?
Oh man. I hope Alan's not on here. I'm going to get a beating maybe from him.
But wait, his article was really influential for you, right? Because it crystallized, wait just a second, we're conflating this concept of reading, right?
Yeah, it's true. It did have a huge impact in the way that I wrote my dissertation and the way that I think about reading and language. This is true. And it really did cause quite the I don't know, the turmoil at the, I don't know who was there in 2007 at the ASHA convention, but it was definitely awesome. And he had some people that weren't very happy with him. I was loving this. And I remember that Hugh said that he had to take a while to think about that, you know, because Alan and Hugh were tight, right? They still are. And I'm sure that Alan went to Hugh and he said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And Hugh thought about it. And then he was like, you know what? I think that's right. Now, they've since had way more deeper conversations about this and published these things in LSHSS and other places. But I still feel like, you know what? This has had a profound impact on the way I think about reading. And that if, just like Alan says, if we just acknowledge that the comprehension piece belongs in the domain of language over there, it's not a reading domain anymore. It just really highlights how much speech language pathologists role, how much they could have a role anyways in literacy instruction and reading comprehension. But I'm preaching to the choir here, I'm sure. But anyways, it just really sort of highlighted things for me. I don't know what you all think about it.
So I want to ask a similar question, or sort of building from that, Doug, actually. So what implications does understanding language as language and reading or decoding as decoding have for assessment and intervention? Like, would it simplify things or does it make it more complicated?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, for you
Oh,
or anyone else who wants to answer.
I totally tuned you out. I don't know. Can you ask that again? I was reading something in the chat.
Okay, so if language is language, if we have the narrow view of reading, and what if every teacher in the country understood the narrow view of reading, would it change the way we assessed or intervened or taught?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, I'm sorry. Well, I just had a moment there. Yes, are you kidding me? Because then you wouldn't, for one thing, you wouldn't use things like reading fluency thinking that it's like some kind of proxy for comprehension. Heaven forbid that even happens. That wouldn't even be on your mind. You wouldn't think, oh, how quickly and how accurately you decode something is then going to reflect your comprehension. No, you would measure someone's comprehension, and that's going to reflect their comprehension. It's like you would go straight to the construct. It's not conflated anymore. I know.
So you can disentangle like decoding from comprehension if you see them as separate constructs.
Yeah, I know it's really clean and nice to do that, but there are some complications to doing that. I realize that. But I do, in a perfect world, like to try to keep them very separate. That's
right. And I mean, we already know that like it's not as clean and simple as the simple view, but it is a useful, diagram or heuristic for helping people understand that we've got to work on both. Otherwise, we don't get reading comprehension.
Yeah.
All right. So I do want to bring up this another point that somebody's made in the chat that I kind of expected would happen. So Karen says that 𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗲 would not say that comprehension exists, that it's just knowledge. So what do you guys think? Is there a construct of comprehension separate from knowledge? Has anybody read The Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler, or Why Knowledge Matters by Ed Hirsch, E.D. Hirsch? Can't see my book, by E.D. Hirsch Jr. All right, Sue, let's hear it.
Yeah, read all of those. I love Hirsch's work and read to him many, many years ago when I was developing some work out here in Australia. Look, I think knowledge is really integral. And I think one of my questions is, I mean, and that's certainly been raised by Wechsler, and in the writing revolution, that's sort of a strand within that as well. And how do we build that broadly enough, particularly for kids from low socioeconomic backgrounds? That's a real challenge. Even getting parents to talk to those children is a real challenge. So yeah, building field knowledge is critical. We need to get it broad enough so then they can extract the meaning. And as I said in the chat, that it's so intertwined with vocabulary. You need those bases. And Hirsch talks about, you know, vocab and knowledge. From that, then you can extract the inference. And you know, it's a really nice kernel to that constellation that you were talking about before, Trina. And that's certainly where I sort of started off with my work on inferential comprehension in that space. So, but yeah, that's the quest. How do we build that? And core knowledge curriculum in the US, I think attempts to do that. And yeah, but I just don't know. So I think it does boil down to what's been taught in schools around science, history, you know, the broader curriculum areas. And it is really important.
So this is something that, you know, obviously I'm thinking about, like the role of knowledge, and is oral language any different, or is it the same thing? I don't know that the answer is, you know, if we have a definitive answer, right? But I kind of perceive these oral language constellation as the system that carries the knowledge to and fro, right? Because we don't really have knowledge without having the oral language skills to convey it. Oral or written language, sorry, we have language skills, right? The constellation that I mentioned before is present in both oral and written language, and it's like the carrier system. So we use it to acquire and to demonstrate our knowledge. And so we can't really gain knowledge or even express it unless we have the oral language carrier characteristics or skills, you know, repertoires, I guess. Without vocabulary, without complex syntax, without inferencing, without morphological knowledge, you know, we need all of those things, discourse structures, right? Well, I don't know if those things fall under knowledge, but we certainly need them to gain and to demonstrate it. At least that's where I'm sitting as of today. What do you guys think?
Well, I like it, but I don't want to be agreeable, but I have to agree with you there. And I think that, can we just like come back around to the question of like, who cares? Like, why do we even care if oral language and written language are similar or equivalent? I think it comes back to what Kelly was saying in the chat about how young children develop syntax and, well, form content use, right? The whole classic thing. They develop that very early on, and they start to develop as well, anyways, as it's been demonstrated, these children develop this complex syntax even really young. I just can't believe that I am losing. Oh, Melanie Shuli's work. Sorry, my goodness. I was just really tragic there. I forgot her name for a minute. She's so great at this kind of thing about showing complex syntax in young children and how it develops. And so why not take advantage of that? If it really is a parallel or an approximation to reading comprehension. So if you take advantage of this, if you understand that improving oral language will likely facilitate the comprehension of what you read, then you can start at 2 years old. You can start at 1. So to me, I think that's one of the reasons why we care, because then you don't have to wait. You don't have to do this thing that so many people say on Facebook, which is, I like to teach decoding first and get that down, and then we work on comprehension. And I'm just like, why? Why do you feel like you need to waste that poor child's time in falling behind further and further in comprehension, when they're struggling learning to decode, you can simultaneously, I'm not talking about replacing, but simultaneously also increase their comprehension through an oral modality instead of written. And yeah, I think I'll stop right
So
there.
I'm curious if our conversation partners agree with you on this, right? That, like, let me just summarize his point so you guys can comment. He's saying that listening comprehension and reading comprehension are same enough, right? Or close enough constructs that you can work on and improve listening comprehension, and that would affect reading comprehension. So, do you guys agree? Disagree?
Okay, I guess I'll speak. I hate speaking. Hi, Doug. This is Rebecca.
Rebecca! Rebecca and I go way back, you guys, 25 years or so.
Oh, gosh. Yes. So I am a resource teacher in coastal North Carolina. My kids come from a very rural and poor area, a lot of second language learners, Doug's favorite. And I have a lot of children who are not at any sort of level to decode at this point. And so I have this one group of these two precious little boys. One is very, very weak in listening comprehension, measured by psychological testing. And the other one is very, very high in listening comprehension, but he cannot decode. So we work together and we do spend some time decoding, and then we spend a whole bunch of time just reading. They're second and third graders. We read second grade level. I read second grade level text to them, and we so that I feel like I'm doing both. I'm doing the decoding. I'm not skimping on the comprehension because they can't decode at this point. So we're always doing lots of language and lots of vocabulary and getting them to talk and speak and listen. So I am trying, like it said, to do both at the same time, due to decoding issues and also due to some listening comprehension issues.
Rebecca is a model special educator who, by the way, is an award-winning special educator. So she sort of is really the model for so many. And I just appreciate you sharing that with people, because it shows that you at least embrace this idea that there is something to increasing someone's oral language. You don't have to wait to teach them to decode first before you can help them with their language. And I love how you do that. I think that's perfect.
Now, if I could just get the gen ed teachers on my side with the language, we'd be good. That's a battle. Because they want to do the decoding. They can't read, so they can't comprehend.
Could you speak a little bit about why you think that's such a battle?
I think, so we recently had a meeting where we dived into the data for our school. And the measures that we used, we found that we were very weak in the area of phonics. And so just as a culture, the administration is like, oh, we don't do enough phonics. We need to do decoding. That's all we need to do. We need to stress that. That's our problem. If you can't decode, then you can't do anything else. But it's not true. I don't know.
Yes. So Trina's got this favorite little saying. You should say it. It's about a pig. You say it all the time.
Weighing a pig doesn't make it grow, right? But
Yeah.
what gets tested gets taught.
Yeah, right.
That's the saying about a pig, right?
Yeah, and I just wonder, Rebecca, like, to what extent did you measure the students' ability to understand complex academic language? And if you didn't even measure that, then you're not going to know that they struggled with it. And the only time you're going to know they struggled with it, by the way, which you did find out, was at the end of third grade when they did their state reading assessment, which measured their ability to understand complex written language. And then 60–70% of them did not do well on that test. I mean, I'm just making an assumption here, right? This is what you see across the country. Everybody thinks that the kids are making so much great progress when they look at the slope of the reading fluency increase and the phonics is increasing, or the phonemic awareness. And then all of a sudden the task requirement, the task expectations, the outcomes change at state reading assessments or district level reading assessments where they're measuring comprehension, and everybody is suddenly in shock. I don't understand how 60% of the kids are not meeting benchmark on this test when we've got 90% who can read at 100 correct words per minute.
Yes, our interventionist loves, it's the fluency. They're not fluent enough. They're not reading fluently. And so, yes,
So-
I hear you.
We know like fluency matters, but there's a point at which fluency doesn't matter anymore. You can't go any faster. That's not going to compensate for the vocabulary and complex syntax that they don't know, right?
Yeah.
And actually, I want to actually transition to another conversation that is similar to this one. It's about comprehension strategies. Okay, there's a lot of I don't know what's the right word. Doug and I have engaged debates about this, that what's the impact of comprehension strategies. That's actually what most schools are teaching: how to find the main idea, monitoring your comprehension, connecting, summarizing, paraphrasing, these kinds of things. These are strategies. But we also know from good research from Willingham, he's the one I love the most about this topic. He writes, hold on, I have a quote from him right here. It says, teaching reading strategies is a low-cost way to give developing readers a boost, but it should be a small part of a teacher's job. Acquiring a broad vocabulary and rich base of background knowledge will yield more substantial and longer-term benefits, right? So sometimes we want to choose the things that are going to give us a quick fix, like fluency, like boosting someone's decoding fluency could give a boost, right? Could. But it's not going to matter if we don't have it backed up with good vocabulary knowledge, right? If they don't have the language and the inferencing skills to attach it to something they know, right? And Megan, I saw your hand up earlier. I just want to make sure if you get a chance to say what you wanted to say, if you want to.
I don't remember what I was gonna say, but I'm in agreement with many of the things you're saying. So we'll go with that.
Okay.
I do like Ashley's comment in the chat. She says, I feel like telling teachers teach knowledge and vocabulary is so overwhelming. It's hard to know where to start. I feel like that's a really real problem, right? Like first of all, you are asking them to do something they've had no training on. They don't, oh man, they generally do not have a formal education on language at all, right? So even being able to understand clearly the difference between speech and language is not there in a lot of the time. So it's a tall task to ask them now to teach language when it's not been fair. It's not fair for them when there's no instruction on it at all. So,
okay, well, so sorry, Doug, I'm cutting you off. Boom, done. We're almost to our hour, but Crystal is asking a question. Remember, this is an experiment. We just go where we're going, right? But Crystal wants to know about partnerships and implementation science. So tell us what you're thinking, Crystal.
Dang, I didn't think I was going to get put on the spot to actually bring it up. That's why I put it in the chat. But those are great.
I also like this topic, so of course I want to talk about it.
Well, I know we've only got 2 minutes, but mostly it just sounded like where we're going is we could certainly start to ask or put blame about why teacher prep programs aren't prepping our teachers the way we want them to, or any of that. But the point is we can't burn down the system and rebuild it. So how are we going to fix it now with the teachers who don't have that training, or the teachers who are feeling overwhelmed? And then the fact that SLPs are the ones who are trying to, oh, of course, I know you're not blaming anybody, Ashley. I didn't mean to say that. You were saying that. But just instead, what are some ways that we can, instead of doing a blame game, because I do worry a little bit that Pamela Snow's blog went a little bit in that direction of blaming, and we don't necessarily want to do that. But so then what are we going to do? And so there are some frameworks for those of us who are doing research in these areas where, such as implementation science or research practice partnerships, where we can work with schools, work with teachers, do some of that interprofessional practice education piece to try to figure out what those barriers are, and how we can improve. So to you, Trina.
That was really good, Crystal. That was well said, very nicely summarized. I am only going to add that I have been contemplating this issue, this topic, and I'm not sure that teachers need to know everything there is to know about language. Like, again, I'm not sure teachers even need to know how to diagram sentences to be able to teach effectively. If we give them the best tools, if we give them really effective tools, we can possibly reduce the amount of professional development necessary. Because frankly, teachers have to be experts at everything, right? And we put a lot of pressure on them. And so, and really, like 𝗄𝗵𝗵𝗴𝗶𝗵𝗵, the academic language people say every teacher is a language teacher. And that's a really tall order. It's pretty unfair, but maybe we, through our community partnerships or through implementation science work, we can create tools that are going to be useful for them without requiring them to have a master's degree in language or in linguistics, right? So I'm exploring those topics, seeing how we can make it easier for them to acquire the skills they need to teach effectively. All right, you guys were awesome. Seriously, I had so much fun. Where are you, Doug? Okay, there you are. So
I'm here. I'm here.
All right, I want to know, so we're going to do another poll. I'm going to ask you this question again, right? Whether listening comprehension and reading comprehension are the same or different, right? And it's okay if you don't change your mind, or if you do, that's all right too. But we certainly want to thank you for, hold on, what am I doing? I don't know how to do the poll. Oh, I just opened the poll. So go ahead and answer the question. Okay, so we want to thank you for joining us on our first Comprehending Comprehension conversation and for contributing so much to the conversation. Your comments, your questions, you know what, it actually, we had enough people. We do have a large group, but there were enough people and you guys were so polite and professional. It worked out really well to have your videos on and your comments on. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you,
Doug, what do you
everyone.
think?
I want to let everyone know that this is being recorded, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but it is being recorded. And if anybody ever wants to go back and listen to this, I'm sure it will be posted somewhere in the world.
And we are going to create a blog
internet.
summary with a lot of links so that you can jump to some of the articles that we talked about and kind of summarize these things. That's one of the reasons why we want to do this.
It's so great to see so many really happy and familiar faces. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe next time we'll even get into some more fights. That would be a lot of fun. We'll see how this goes.
All right, so let me give you the poll results. All right, we have 58% think that listening and reading comprehension are different, but 42% went up from 16% that say they're the same. So my guess is we know that they are different. There are differences, right? And research hasn't totally told us exactly how, but they are same enough that it matters and that we might have some educational traction if we think about them as same enough, right? Those are my thoughts. Doug?
I agree almost, but I'm still not totally convinced that they're different in any way at all, or that they have to be different in any way at all. Because if they were so different, or if they were different in any way, I just don't think my audiobook would work. I'm not so sure that the taking away the supersegmentals, which maybe is not fair, but I'm just not sure that a left branching causal adverbial subordinate clause is still not a left branching adverbial subordinate clause when it's written down or when it's spoken orally. But there are some aspects, of course, to oral language which add to the communication, I'll give it that much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. You guys have a great Friday evening.